Who would have thought that amidst years of heightened tension between India and China over their border disputes, China would overtake the US to become India's largest trading partner yet again in FY24? So, how has trade between these two Asian giants evolved, and why is it proving so difficult for India to decouple itself from its neighbor? Let's take a closer look at how important India's trade relationship with China really is. In FY24, bilateral trade grew by 4% to reach $118.4 billion, up from $113.8 billion the previous year. Meanwhile, India's trade with the US declined by 8.6% to $118.3 billion in the same period. Over the past 5 years, trade between India and China has surged from around $80 billion to its current level. This is quite in contrast to India's trade with the US, where India enjoys a hefty $36.7 billion trade surplus, which means exporting more than India imports. However, the reverse is true with China, where India suffers from a major trade deficit. So how did this trade deficit with China widen to such a staggering level? Well, last year, the deficit hit a record of $85 billion, and this had doubled over the past 4-year period. Imports from China grew by 3.3%, crossing the $100 billion mark, even as India's overall imports declined by 5.6% to $675 billion. This increase in imports from China overshadowed an 8.8% growth in exports to China, which stood at $16.7 billion. Currently, China accounts for 10.6% of India's global trade and 15% of its import bill. This high trade deficit has become a source of friction between the two countries, with India accusing China of dumping goods across various sectors. The bulk of India's imports from China are dominated by machinery and electric appliances, accounting for over half of India's total imports from China. Machinery alone amounted to nearly $54 billion, marking an increase from previous years. Other major imports include chemicals, plastic goods, iron, steel products, as well as fertilizers. India has implemented various measures to address this widening trade deficit, including increasing import duties and restricting certain items. For instance, import duties were raised on items like air conditioners, electric vehicles, and more, aiming to promote domestic manufacturing and reduce dependence on these Chinese imports where China has a cost advantage. However, these efforts have had very limited success so far. Now, unlike any other country, China's vast manufacturing capabilities as well as its competitive pricing across pretty much every sector poses a huge challenge for India. Industries such as renewable energy, electronics, as well as electric vehicles in India often lack the scale as well as the technology to compete globally or to produce cost-competitive alternatives domestically here in India. Now, looking ahead, initiatives like the Production-Linked Incentives or the PLI scheme could likely boost local manufacturing capabilities in the medium to long term. These incentives aim to encourage domestic production of goods currently heavily imported from neighboring China. While India faces its own challenges in balancing trade relations with its neighbor, the journey towards reducing dependence on Chinese goods remains fraught with challenges, and these require strategic, long-term solutions. The only question that remains to be answered is, can India find a way to balance its trade relations while fostering its own industries? And that answer is keenly awaited.